Howdy, folks, and welcome to your storm chasing forecast show for Wednesday, June 17th. I am Gabriel Harbor, and although it appears I am flying solo, that is actually not the case. Second half of this show, I'm going to have Coach Cameron Nixon en route right now to chase today's blockbuster event. They weren't able to be by their computers, but that's okay. We were still able to call them, pick their brains on exactly what they think might go down with today's severe weather setup. Before we get too deep into it, just remember you are looking at the Weatherfront browser app. Absolutely beautiful tool, something you'll want to check out. It's packaged with the mobile subscription. Check that out at weatherfront.com, link in the description. Alright, so not a lot to say here. It's the talk of the town. I'm sure you've heard about it. This massive risk area. I'm recording this actually right now, 15-20 minutes before the day one outlook actually comes out, so there's a good chance that you might see something a little bit different if you are watching this, but that's okay. You get the gist of it. Central Illinois, Western Indiana, in the crosshairs. And one thing I want to mention before we go too much further is the SPC was very explicit about the fact that there is a tornado risk along the cold front through Kansas, down through Missouri. The shear vectors are orthogonal, which means there's a good chance for discrete supercells as the cold front comes through. If these supercells can actually take advantage of the environment that's ahead of them, you could definitely see some fireworks down along here as well. So do not discount this risk area, especially if at some point today it looks like maybe something is about to bust up here and not play out the way it was expected. Could absolutely be a pivot down to the cold front play. Let's take a look first at our 500 millibar winds, and it doesn't get much more classic than this. You can see just this massive jet streak sweeping through the risk area. Here we are at noon Eastern Time, 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m. Just not a whole lot to say here. These deep purples, these even reds that are showing up here if we go a little bit deeper. That's just an insane amount of 500 millibar flow for this time of the year, and especially in this area. You don't see that all too often. And where this divergence occurs all along this exit region of this shortwave trough is exactly where you're going to see the massive low-level response. Go ahead and just actually skip to our surface map here, and you can see there just about as robust as they come low pressure center here, and really giving us just these beautiful backed winds at the surface all across the risk area. You can see 15, 20, even 25 knots here at the surface. Or is it miles per hour? I always forget if the surface winds are miles per hour and the upper level winds are knots. And whatever. You get the point. Strong winds at the surface, giving you a backing wind profile. And then we take a look at the star of today's show, which is the 850 millibar winds, the low-level jet. And boy, oh boy, is that thing just absolutely screaming. This is why the setup today is poised to be something potentially historic. You just don't see a low-level jet like this late in the season and in this area of the country. You'd expect something like this maybe in late March, early April down in Dixie Alley, but to have it situated just south of Chicago, who knows how long it'll be before we see something like this again. More on that in just a moment, especially when we get to pluck some soundings. I'll have a little bit more to say about it. The dew points here are pretty self-explanatory. You can see that warm front pushing through right over here. And it's going to be extremely interesting to see just how far north that warm front can actually end up, because if we jump down here to our composite reflectivity, you can see that we're going to have a big MCS-ish type convection fest rolling through the target area. I wouldn't even call it late morning at this point. That's early afternoon. This is 3 p.m., and you can see that we still have a ton of convection over the target area. Now, with those strong 850 millibar winds, we should get ample moisture recovery just because it's going to be pulling up so much from the south at such a breakneck speed. But one of the potential failure modes for today is if this convection lingers for too long, it could seriously hamper the northward movement of that warm front. So if you're out there chasing today, this is probably the number one thing you're going to want to be looking at is just how far north does that warm front go. Make sure you stay in the game relative to its position, because if you get on the wrong side of that front, everything's going to be elevated and you're not going to have the day you were hoping to have. We go a little bit further and you can see here, man, just like pearls on a string. This is just super, you know the memes, the her is a supercell printer, go burr. That's pretty much what you're looking at right here. These are just about as crazy as you're ever going to see on a camera. Now, I do want to talk about one thing. I don't think it's an actual failure mode, but I think it is possibly a this wasn't as bad as we thought it might potentially be mode, which is definitely a win. You'll take them where you can get them on a day like this. If you look at where the strongest cape is setting up, it definitely seems like it is displaced to the west of that strongest low-level jet wind. Not by a lot, but I could definitely see a scenario where maybe this cape comes in a little slower, maybe this jet streak here comes in a little bit faster, and maybe we get a situation where it's like ships in the night where they simply do not cross paths in the way that we were thinking they might, and you still end up with severe weather. Don't get me wrong, there's going to be tornadoes today, but maybe you don't get it as bad. That, of course, is just one model, though, so let's go ahead and pull up the NAM, see what our good old buddy the NAM has to say about this. And yeah, you can see even the NAM, like some of these stronger winds, if we take a look here, we can see that our strongest winds are right over in this area. And we're not looking at the strongest cape there. We got to go back over here. This is where we get our real strong cape, and 45, 50 knots, that's still a lot, but maybe it's not as much as these crazy SRH values of 500, 600 that we were seeing earlier. Let's look at the Rufus here last. Rufus also showing something similar. You've got your best cape situated right over here, and your strongest low-level jet winds over here to the east. Again, I don't think this is going to be a situation where, oh, this ended up being the failure mode that made the day go bust, but I do think that this is potentially how we would get a severe weather event that's not quite the ceiling that people have been talking about. Last thing we'll pop over to is take a look at this storm relative helicity, which is really, for all intents and purposes, just another way of visualizing that low-level jet and exactly what it's doing today. And you can see this is just pretty crazy visual representation of the anomaly that's going to be occurring over the target area. These winds are just ungodly right here. If we take some soundings in the area, let's go ahead and find an area that's right on the boundary of both of these. And yeah, this is just a silly amount of 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity. And we're pushing 600. That's just insane. If we get anything remotely resembling this kind of photograph with these types of somewhat modest cape profiles, there are definitely going to be some fireworks. Let's go a little later in the day. See what happens maybe right here on the border. And yeah, these just continue to be absolutely brutal. Jump back over to the NAM for a second here, see what they look like maybe with the more robust moisture profile. So if this were to play out and we got this tongue of stronger cape, let's take one right in here. Got that stronger cape, the lagging tail of that 850 millibar wind. So yeah, I've got the stronger cape profile here, a little bit smaller photograph, but not that I put too much stock into these hazards right here, but this one's even giving a PDS tornado. Like, this little guy here does not look very friendly. All right, that's going to do it for my portion here, at least as far as breaking down this setup is concerned. Please remember to check out our channel membership. If you like these videos, that's how we know that you are enjoying them. There's bonus videos at the lowest tier, and the higher tier gives you access to our group coaching sessions, which happen every week. There's also a coach Q&A channel on Discord that you have access to where you can talk to our coaches whenever you have any questions, anything that you want to know. All right, let's go ahead and pass it over to Cameron now.
All right, I've got Cameron Nixon on the line here. He very graciously agreed to give us some analysis, even though he has been driving all day to get to the target for this afternoon/evening. Cameron, what are you seeing out there today? What caused you to haul behind all the way from New Mexico, where you were a couple of days ago, into the trenches of Illinois this afternoon?
as does happen, I think we both bought into the hype. Obviously, at a day 2 moderate SIG 2, it's don't really want to miss it, especially when there's not much else going on. And trust me, believe me, we both tried our damnedest to find like an alternate target, and I don't think there is one, so I think we're both just headed to Illinois.
So is there any particular thing that sticks out to you about this setup that you think is going to be the main payoff here?
Yes. As a chaser, fast storm motions are rarely an excellent payoff. But I think the thing that got us, we've both been chatting about this, I think the thing that got us hooked is the fact that we have the potential for multiple long track supercells going west to east in kind of a stair-step fashion. And that's one of our favorite chase moves is to do that stair-step. You start off at the most northern supercell that you could reach that day, and then you see another one coming up from the southwest, so you zigzag down maybe a county, intercept that one, another one's coming from the west, and then you go down another county. So it's possible that we could intercept multiple supercells.
Now, those fast storm motions definitely going to be the name of the game. I see a lot of comparisons to early spring Dixie Alley setups, but I think the one thing that is different here is you should actually have some visibility a couple of miles downstream from these storms versus in Dixie, you really have to get right up in there if you want to see anything beyond the trees. So I think that's also something to consider and maybe makes this a little bit more of an appealing setup.
I agree. Yeah, it's never truly been appealing, but it's never really been unappealing. I think we're not dealing with those soggy low levels as far as the data has shown me. And generally, we've even seen like convective mode is not that messy. Generally, discrete supercells emanating from showery activity.
Now, as far as failure modes are concerned, what would you be looking for that would maybe signal to you that this day isn't going to quite live up to the hype?
Yes. So this is where I rub my hands together. And obviously, like, this might not take effect as much as I think it will. I've noticed a concerning trend, if you're a storm chaser, on some of the latest cam runs, basically depicting a lot more kind of popcorny, weak convection in place of the long track supercells that earlier cam runs had. And I was really scratching my head around that. But I think what possibly could be happening, and this is it sounds like a far-fetched theory, and I'm not sure it really is, but where storms are initiating is on a cold front aloft. It's on an 850 millibar moisture front out in western Illinois. And those elevated initiation mechanisms can be really finicky if you want a truly kind of multi-supercell event. And really counterintuitively, I'm noticing that the soundings that I'm plucking in the vicinity where storms are initiating actually don't have much shear at the level that they're initiating from. So all the shear is in the lowest 1 to 2 kilometers, and they're initiating at about 2 kilometers and above because they're elevated. So I'm really worried that we actually do get a proliferation of kind of popcorn convection owing to kind of the weakly sheared nature of that elevated initiating boundary. That leaves us not enough room for supercells. That said, I just think the expansive warm sector, any uncertainties as to like how that MCS recovery sets in, and just the large time and space window that we have for multiple supercells, I think there's going to be tornadoes and perhaps lots of them and perhaps intense tornadoes. It's just, I think that might bar us from a truly high risk kind of ceiling.
Now, we're having this conversation a couple of hours out from the next round of convective outlooks coming out from the SPC. Do you think those mad lads over there are going to do it, pull the trigger on a high risk?
I can never truly speak for them, but I would not be surprised if they waited, if they hesitated their finger on that trigger tonight. I think there's enough uncertainty, especially with the recent trends of the convective allowing models, that would at least give me some pause in bringing out their red pink Sharpies.
Last question I have for you. I've heard a lot of people in
Yeah.
the past talk about how too much shear can actually tear storms apart. And
Yeah.
it looks like there's an ungodly amount of SRH, especially like 0 to 1 kilometer SRH that's on tap. Can that
Yeah.
ever be a bad thing for storms?
Yes and no, and yes and no again, and yes. Me and Michael were actually just chatting about this. As far as I have seen published literature on the shear ripping storms apart problem, can absolutely be a thing in the mid-levels. If you have too much updraft tilt, which is actually what happened in Kansas, southeast Kansas, you had these really small supercells initiate and then immediately split because of the really strong shear, and were heavily tilted. And both of those can help increase dry air entrainment and successfully choke off the storm. So mid-level shear, in the absence of strong enough buoyancy, can be a negative. Low-level shear, there's a whole lot to get into for that, and honestly, I might plug a future office hours with me to talk about that. But yeah, that can absolutely be a hindrance to tornado genesis in some cases. It's just really hard to say if that'll have an effect.
Thank you again so much, Cameron, for taking a few minutes out of your evening to chat while you're en route.
Yeah, absolutely.
And can't wait
to
really see what the day holds.
Yep, me too. We'll be there.
See ya.
Remember to check out those links in the description below, and then watch another video.